Hey everybody, this is Ben, Amateur Knife Guy, doing a review video on my G&G or Grant & Gavin Model B Deadlock. Picked this puppy up a few months ago and been nothing but extremely happy with this knife since I've had it. Unlike other people who buy knives and show them off on the internet, I only make videos about knives that I use. So this knife is one of the few that I've bought over the last few years, and for a damn good reason, pardon my French. It basically answers the dream, so to speak, for me of automatic knife ownership, and that it's basically the perfect knife for me. It's the fantasy for an automatic knife lover. A knife that basically, it's a switchblade. It's a fun toy, if you will, but it's also a great user. And unlike most other, out the front especially, or double action, in other words, in and out automatic knives like this knife, unlike most of those out there, this knife is unique in the fact that it's 100% rock solid like a fixed blade knife when it's open. There's absolutely no movement with the blade, in or out. I can't make it move in or out like some. You might pull on it, it'll move forward this way and then snap back in. None of that silly crap with this knife. No top to bottom wiggle, no side to side. No matter how hard I try to move this thing, and I have tried, trust me, there's absolutely no moving that blade once it's locked open. Not simply less blade play, like with other knives, not gimmicked into a solid lockup with some sort of a retention screw or something you would have to adjust somewhere in the handle or hidden some micro screw somewhere. No crap like that. It just is what it is. When this puppy's open, it's solid, period, end of story. So if I were to recommend this knife based on one thing alone, it would be that. In fact, that's the calling card for the Grant & Gavin Deadlock. The fact that it's 100% rock solid when it's open, period, end of story. That's it. So, key perks of the Model B Deadlock that are apparent to me, things that I'm aware of, unique to the Model B versus the Model A. Stainless steel 420 tempered screws. So in other words, body sweat, grime, carrying this thing in your pocket, even in, the butt crack Louisiana, if you happen to live down there, not going to hurt these guys, these screws here. Neither will a little over monkeying or torquing them, because they're tempered. They're not going to strip out on you either on the screw head or the screw threads, which turn down into the frame. That's right, these screws turn down into the frame, and not simply into the titanium, but there's actually a tempered steel pin that each one of these screws turn into inside the frame. Back to the Model B, feature pocket clip, grip clip, mechanical clip. In other words, they did away with this feature, this clip, for at least a batch or so. For whatever the reason, they brought it back, and been a big fan of the grip clip from day one. Love it. Titanium switch, that's always been a mainstay, as far as I know, on the Deadlock. They've done away with an adjustment screw that used to be there, probably just to simplify things. It is, of course, bolted in from the inside of the handle by two pretty sturdy screws. Quality blade steel like usual. It's a 20 CV steel. You might notice that my Deadlock, unlike most others, does not have any what Gavin calls inlays. In other words, extra metal pieces in the handle scales. I just don't care for that look or feel being that it's a user knife, I don't want something on the scales that's going to abrade my soft skin, cause blisters, that kind of stuff. I just like the bare scales. Plus, he was nice enough to machine in the Hawk Claw logo anyway. Moving on to the inside of the knife. T8 Torx screws, by the way. By the way, you never want to try and remove the screws on the switch side of your knife. There's no need to for one. For another, they are basically liquid welded into place with red Loctite. So even though those screws are tempered 420 steel, you may still booger them up trying to remove them. It would take a hell of a lot of force. Good luck with that. You'll probably piss off Gavin, blah, blah, blah. So, I don't know. Gavin's a pretty nice guy. So there's 5 screws to remove after you disengage your blade mechanism. Reason you want to disengage your blade first is, well, relieve tension on a blade, you know, spring tension on the blade. Kind of a no-brainer there if you're at all familiar with auto knives. Each one of these screws has a very tight tolerance. Screw head to the bit or tool, which is nice. Pretty long screw, so there's a good amount of travel down into the recessed scale there, and then into the respective blade, or the pin that the screw turns down into. Again, that's probably, if I had to guess, a tempered steel pin that the tempered screw turns down into. So that one's really tight there, if you can check that out. Cool. It's not a magnetized bit or tool. It's just that that screw is tightly fit. Good tolerances. Love it. Pull this guy out. There are 4 in the front of the handle on each side. Another tight fit screw there. And then 1 down here in the under the clip that, or pocket clip, that does not come out, or just because it's blocked by the pocket clip itself, which is no big deal. So you don't have to worry about losing that screw. It's going to wiggle the scale up and off. And we've got, on my sample, of course, carbon fiber. And as you can see, very cleanly machined inside and out. Carbon fiber is really lightweight but very strong stuff. This feels like a feather in my hand. Probably most of the weight's coming from the titanium pocket clip. Of course, on the inside, we've got a pair of screws holding that puppy in place. If I had to guess, they're probably Loctited in, so I'm not going to ever recommend you try to get those out of there. Why would you need to anyway, right? In the Model B, I'm going to put a link, by the way, to Gavin's original takedown for his Model A video, or Model A Deadlock. He did a video on that where he opened up the Model A. Regurgitating my words a little bit, sorry. New to the Model B, though, we have a solid steel big piece strike plate here. On the Model A, it was more of a kind of a leaf shape here, and then kind of a bar. Not a big solid piece like this one, in other words. The tolerances, again, super tight around these 3 pins. One here, here, and here that hold the strike plate, as it's called, where it should be. As you can see, I'm going to turn the knife over. Nothing's falling apart because of tolerances. To open that up or take the strike plate out, you're going to take something like my handy dandy Torx tool here and just kind of carefully wedge that up away from the blade edge, of course. Should be a no-brainer. Got a space there. I'm going to lift it up the rest of the way, a little bit here, a little bit there. Might have to do this a couple times because, again, these pins to the strike plate are probably fit within thousandths of an inch, honestly. I've been around my sister's dad, who was a gunsmith for many years. I used to watch him put together custom handguns, things like that, and I could relate to the tolerances within this knife. Simply just awesome in the fit and finish in this thing. My video really doesn't do it justice. Ooh, there's a little bit of pocket crud in there, sorry. my user knife here. Big solid piece of steel. I'd guesstimate maybe 1/8 of an inch thick or pretty close to that. Very cleanly machined on both sides. You're going to notice a groove here. Machined angle, bevel, whatever you want to call it, goes kind of all the way around the one side. That coincides with a bevel on the blade pin here. Nice hefty blade pin, by the way. And that is just part of what attributes to the lockup of the knife when it's both closed and open. Inside the Model B, new to the Model B, is a completely newly redesigned lock mechanism, which of course, like the Model A, rides inside the blade tang. Unlike the Model A, where you had a bar here and a bar there, this being the lock bar, the D-lock over here, parallel to each other, you now have a bar here, and then the D-lock, the big, kind of, honestly, it reminds me of an Egyptian battery, one of those, or like an olive oil bottle, something you'd keep something like that in, or, you know, an Egyptian organ holding embalming bottles, along those lines. The shape of the D-lock bar there. Completely redesigned, according to Gavin, to help with the lock, just again, further improving the stability of the lock mechanism, overall design of the knife. The Model B, continued R&R improvement, that kind of stuff, kind of like other brands do. Spyderco comes to mind, constantly working on improving their designs. The way it works, if you've watched the Model A takedown video, you can freely move this blade inside the frame, by the way. You may notice a lack of, if you followed the Model A takedown, no machine grooves inside the frame, as in the Model A, because, again, further improvement, fit and finish. The blade tang now coincides so tightly with the frame, there's no movement, nothing significant enough with the blade to cause concern for the blade edge to rub against the inside of the frame. So no need for those grooves anymore. The way this mechanism works, I'm going to demonstrate, just like in the Model A, but different of course. You pull it forward, locks open like so. Voila. Even without the strike plate in place. Tried to back out on me a little bit there, but locked open. There you have it. Front to back at least, rock solid. Strike plate's not in place, so I'm not going to expect it to be completely all the way around solid. But if you can get a good look at the blade pin here, there's also a pin here, and kind of a relief for what would look like for a pin. That's because new to the Model B, you have the ability to, according to Gavin, after around 80,000 cycles, good luck getting to that number with your knife, you can actually take this blade pin, pull it out, rotate it to another position, hence the milled end slot here for that pin, rotate it around, and you're good for another 80,000 or so cycles. Really cool. Like before, but different, Model A to Model B, we've got a machined in block here, probably tempered steel inside the titanium, pressed into place. Machine block here, inside the titanium frame, pressed into place. The aforementioned pins in the frame, probably tempered steel for those 4 screws at the front, 1 here at the back. Of course, those coincide, run through the frame for the screws on the other side of the handle. Disengaging the lock mechanism, I'm going to hold the blade sturdy so you can see it in function. Unlock, boop, there we go, and then of course under this tension of the springs the blade would snap back into position, boop, lock back here, and it would be locked shut. Fire it forward, kind of the same deal. I'm going to do this without cutting myself, cross my fingers, and yeah, so you get the idea. I'm going to do this off camera, so to speak, so I can unlock it without throwing it forward into my phone. The blade flies forward. Oh my god. Okay. Give me a moment here. Not going to cut myself. Let's see. Use your head, Ben. Okay, let's see. Kind of disengage the lock, keeping our fingers crossed. Okay, the blade wants to come out. So we're gonna lift it up. No big deal. There we go. Blade's out of the handle frame. This side, that side, similar setup. Inside the handle, we've got, similar to before, Model A. Slider plate moves back and forth with the switch, which again, I'm going to pull the spring assembly out of the way so we can get a good look. Same design as before, as far as I know, with the spring assembly. 2 springs, thrust blocks, blah blah blah. Gavin goes into more detail with that in his takedown video. 2 steel screws bolted through into the switch like I mentioned earlier. And of course, spring-loaded claw here, spring-loaded claw at the back. Those puppies put tension on the lock mechanism in the blade to make it function. Blade fires forward, spring claw moves up, puts tension on that lock bar, basically wedging that lock bar down, pushing the ball, or now it's actually more of a tic-tac shape, kind of a block, into its position. Like you can see functioning there, moving back and forth. I'm going to try and not get back in there. Okay. Use my torque tool here. Move it one way. Block falls down. Lock pops up. You get the idea. That little block there would then, of course, pop in behind its block here. Tempered steel against tempered steel. And you've got a rock solid open mechanism. Brilliant, simple, all in the same. Another cool thing about this type of design, I'm going to try and demonstrate real quick, is that even if, let's just say, off-the-wall example, you buy your Deadlock, 20 years down the road, you didn't have the forethought, you know, mechanically speaking, to buy an extra spring assembly from Gavin. He says 200,000 plus cycles, he's tested these knives without spring failure. Okay. Still, things happen. Let's say your knife loses a spring, both springs break. Springs are out of the picture now. This knife would still function as a gravity knife. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. You can Google it. In other words, you don't need springs to make the knife function, at least not the main springs, as they're called. I'm going to try and get the strike plate back into place here. And again, the tolerances are so tight, you really kind of got to wiggle it a little here. Seat it down, lift it up, seat it down. Usually, I have to seat the back first. Wiggle the blade a little, lift the front up, wiggle here, wiggle there, wiggle, wiggle everywhere, and it eventually seats like it's supposed to. I'm going to need to lift the front up, basically hold it up slightly. There we go. And then hold that puppy. There we go. Snap, snap, into place. So to demonstrate the gravity knife effect, or function, I'm going to move the switch forward. Sorry, forgot the handle scale's not on. Voila. Okay. So basically, if you were to have the handle scale bolted down, the knife would still function as a knife, so to speak, without the spring assembly in place. Now, of course, the switch itself is going to move around, but worst case scenario, you could still cut with this thing even if you didn't have a spring assembly in place. okay? Lock mechanism solid. I can unlock it, of course. Little on the extreme side. Okay, a little far-fetched, but yeah, you get it. Solid knife, awesome design. I'm going to put it back together completely. Take the strike plate back off. Blade back out. Spring assembly back in place. It really is this simple, just a little bit of make sure blocks are down where they're supposed to be. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to take my blade, make sure the pins are sitting where they're supposed to be, make sure the blade is unlocked so the block will sit down. I'm going to drop my blade back into place. Drop per se, there we go. Make sure it's in between spring assembly where it's supposed to sit. Put my strike plate back on. Again, probably a little bit of a juggling act here, which you saw me do earlier. Try not to poke myself. There we go. Click, click, snap, snap. Make sure it looks like the strike plate is completely flush and down. Put my handle scale back into place. And it really doesn't matter how you tighten the screws back down. I like to do the one down here first, just most of the way in, and I'll do these guys. And I start each one kind of carefully, even though they're tempered steel. Going into tempered steel, I still don't like the idea of stripping a screw thread. I don't know if any of you out there watching have ever stripped a screw in a handle on a knife before, but oh my god, it's a nightmare. Or on a pocket clip is worse of all, I think. I think I was moving a pocket clip on a Benchmade knife, oh god, 10 plus years ago. Switching the pocket clip from one side of the scale to the other, moved this pocket, the screws, one of them stripped out, and I was like, oh my god, I had to call Benchmade. I think they took care of me. They sent me like 2 or 3 extra screws a couple weeks later, finally got them, but again, it was just something I shouldn't have to put up with, in my opinion. Now, I don't muscle these down, so to speak. I'm not worried about the carbon fiber, not worried about the screws. Even though I don't put any Loctite on these, I don't feel like they shake loose from use. I haven't noticed them doing that in the couple months now of having this knife, using it almost daily. If you don't believe me on that one, check out my other videos, clicking on my name. I do in fact use this knife pretty aggressively daily. And just opening and closing it, the screws don't shake loose, so I don't put any Loctite on them, don't feel the need, even blue Loctite. But yeah, I just snug them down, snug them again. I don't really crank them down, just basically finger tight. Just gonna open it back up. It's literally open, functional. Yep. Really cool. Rock solid. Another cool thing, I don't know if you've ever used an automatic knife before, thought you were done cutting, about to close it, change your mind. Sometimes with other knives I've had over the years, if you move the switch at all, you'll disengage even just a little bit the lock up on the blade. Not so with the Deadlock. You've got to completely move that puppy all the way back before it'll disengage. And it's smooth as butter. I mean, really. There's almost no perceivable breaking point, so to speak, opening or closing. You just push it and then it just releases, it opens, releases, it closes. Anyway, thanks for hearing me and watching. Have a good one.